do one final quick example. We'll do this in Spider, I think, and then we will take a short, maybe a short break. So let's say we want a function to convert miles per hour to kilometers per hour. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to do this, right? If we have a velocity, so kph equals our velocity in miles per hour, right? So miles divided by hours are the units. And we have to multiply this by, we want kilometers per day. So kilometers per day. So we got to multiply this times something with kilometers on the top and miles on the bottom. And then something with hours on the top and days on the bottom. Right? If we do this and we do some cancellations, hours cancel against hours, miles cancel against miles, that leaves us with kilometers per day. Right? So our function is going to be, we start off with our def, right? And we want to say kilometers per day, or no, miles per hour to kilometers per day. We're going to have one parameter. That's going to be our velocity, our miles per hour. And then having defined our parameter list, we put our colon and we indent 4, and now it's doing it right. That's why this is better than Python Tutor. This uses spaces instead of tabs. So now we have to actually express our function, right? So we have our kilometers per, I'm going to call our final variable kilometers per day, and that's going to be our velocity in miles per hour. And then we want to do number of kilometers per mile, right? So we know that that's 8 divided by 5, right? There are 8 kilometers in 5 miles. And then we want hours per day, and we know that there's 24 hours in 1 day. So we'll just leave that one off. Right, so this should convert us from miles per hour to kilometers per day. This is our parameter. Whatever we call this with, that's going to be the value that gets plugged into velocity. This is our local variable. This exists only in our miles per hour to kilometers per day function. And then at the end, we're going to want to return something. So we're probably going to want to return kilometers per day. And we can call this. We can do print MPH2KPD of 1. 1's a good one. 1 mile per hour should be 24 miles per day, right? So that should be about somewhere around 40 kilometers per day, give or take. If we're around 40, I'll expect that we're pretty much good. Maybe we want to do 5/8 of a mile. MPH2KPD of 5/8, because that would be 1 kilometer per hour. That should be 24 kilometers per day, I hope, if I'm doing my math right. I'm sorry? Okay, give me just a second and I'll answer that one, because that is an important question. And then we'll do an MPH KPD, maybe 73, which is what I like to go on the highway. All right. MPH2KPD. All right, and we can actually run this, I hope. And so the first one, just like I estimated, it's right around 40 miles, 40 kilometers in a day. The second one is exactly 24 kilometers in a day, which is what we thought. And then the third one is if I'm heading 73 miles per hour and I drive for 24 hours straight, I should be, about 2,800 kilometers away from where I started. So the question is, what's the difference between print and return. And this is something that's really confusing for a lot of people. So if I do a print up here, yeah, KPD, okay? And I don't need to have a return. If we don't return anything, we just print it out and it gets printed out. And then there's no return value. And if I run this, what we'll find out is we're printing from this function, but when we actually print out the return value from this function, we're printing out something called none. Okay, so a return statement puts something back into the main program. It returns a value into the main program that can then be used. So you can either print it out down here, or I can even do something like +7. I can use it in an expression, or I can use it further on, or I can assign it to a variable. Of 1, right? And then I can do a print A. So if I do a return, I get a value that I can actually use. If I do a print, I'm printing out the value, but I'm not actually able to do anything else with it back in the main function because it's not returning a value. Now, it is the case that I can have both a print and a return. And then what you'll find out is that the print prints and the return returns, right? So we printed out up here, we printed out this 38.4. Then here, we returned the 38.4 and added 7 to it and printed that out. And then here we returned, we called MPH2KPD again. We did the print, this print. And then we returned and stored it in the value of A, and then printed out A here. And then, of course, we printed and returned and printed and returned, right? We print the first one, we return the value, and that gets used in the return as well. So the difference between print and return is print prints out a string value. It has no impact on the rest of the program. Once the print is done, the value of this statement is over. Okay? Return returns the value back, and then we can use it later on. Sometimes we'll ask you to print a value out in a function. That is a valid thing for a function to do. A lot of my output, in my programs is actually a function that formats the output correctly and puts it out and doesn't return anything except maybe an error indicator. That's perfectly valid, but you can't use the return values from that unless you actually are returning a value. You end up with something called none instead. Let me take this +7 out, because then you can see that none is actually a valid value. It just means there's no return statement, or return didn't have anything in it. Does that kind of answer your question? Sure. And that's very important to know those distinctions. Okay. So I got sidetracked, and I think now we've lost our time to work on our first example. But at least let me pull it up and show you what it is. If we look at our Lecture 5 exercises, our first example, is really pretty much what we just did. We want you to write a function, convert to Farad, right? We just did a function, KPD, miles per hour to KPD, right? Well, we want you to write a function that converts from Celsius to Fahrenheit, and we want you to return a value, and then your code should call the function 3 times to print the result. Okay, does that make sense? Well, Submittee's going to go through, this is one of the things that I told you about. It's called static analysis, but we will actually check that the function exists with the correct name. and we will make sure that the calculation you put out is correct, and we will make sure that you call that function 3 times. Again, you want to follow the same kind of process we did with the KPD example. We want you to, write a function that returns a value, and then from your main code, call that function 3 times, printing out the result from your code. On the other hand, exercise 2 is what you and I just talked about, or what we just talked about the difference between a print and a function and a return statement. 2, you don't need, frame string does not need a return call. It doesn't need a return line. It doesn't have to return out anything. Frame string is going to take its parameter in, and it's just going to print it out with a nice little box around it. Okay? So these are 2 different examples, right? This one, example 1, should have a return statement. You shouldn't be printing from within the function. Example 2 should not have a return statement, or it can have, if you want, it can have a return statement that's empty. Both of those work. But the print should be done right from the function itself. Okay?